It's good to be back. So we've been doing a series on the promise, and if you've missed any of the videos, just check in the description below. The whole list is there. I think right now there are about 6 or 8 of them. And the promise we've been talking about is the promise of God, and it's been very interesting to just listen to comments and have conversations around it. One of the big things that has come up is the question of what to do in the waiting time. You receive the promise and there's this long time lag between when the promise is given and when it comes to pass. This week I've been thinking about that, and it's because that was also a concern of mine in the days before. It can be hard, and it was very hard for me until one of my brothers brought something to light. And he said, the destination is not the promise, the destination is the process. And he said it to me on a day when I could have smacked him for saying it. I was having a really bad day. And I called this particular brother for help and for strength, and that's what he said to me. And the reason it upset me is because in my thinking, when God gives a promise, he should make it work haraka upesi, as in as quickly as possible. And that wasn't happening. So I was sitting there and I was like, God is unfair. I don't like what he's doing. And my brother said the destination is the process, not the promise, because then the promise becomes like an idol. Let me tell you, it took me a few days to actually unpack the whole process. So what I'm going to do in this and a couple of more videos is we'll just discuss process, right? Promise and process. Because if the destination is the process, then the promise is, that award, the promise is the outcome. But if the destination is the process, it tells me that there's something that has to be unpacked in that place around process. So I'll start with a very simple definition of what process is. Process is the actions or the steps that we take from point A to achieve point B, right? So it's the action or steps we take. It's the path we follow. It's the way to promise from where we are. So think about it in terms of work. There's a very set structure of how you manufacture a ballpoint pen, right? There's a very specific way of how you manufacture a car. Remember, my son and I love watching documentaries, and one of the documentaries we like watching is how it's made. Or, car shows, how they show you how the car goes from design to execution. And we remember watching one particular show, and that particular car, they used the hide of 15 animals, cows in particular, to make that one car. 15 cows die every time these guys need to make a car. Okay, they don't really die, but they buy the hide of 15 cows. That for me changed how I thought about that car, because they show how they design it so there's the standard design, but the owner customizes it, right? So do you want this shade of brown? Do you want it in blue? Do you want it in red? Do you want it stitched in whatever color? What is the paint color you want? And then on that paint color, which of the shades are you looking at? The engine capacity is X, Y, Z. Which of the 3 do you want? And the process is, and that particular vehicle, it's handmade. The leather parts are all hand cut, hand stitched, hand fixed. The automation is around the engine and the electricals and all these things. And then they have a way they put it in. So they do this part and that part and that part. So that's process. So you can enter the factory and track. This is Chisubire's car. It takes 6 weeks to put each car together. And what I completely loved about that car is, I think it's the guy who does the leather work, or who puts in the steering, who stamps his name, or he writes his name on the inside. So in the production line, you can tell 10 cars done by Chisubire, 16 cars done by Jerry, 59 cars done by Wakesho, like that, you can tell. And that stuck with me this season as I'm thinking about this section of process, because if they miss one step in that process, the end game is not the same. It won't be the same car. They won't be able to put their insignia on it. They won't be able to sell it at whatever price it's sold at. Very different from the mass-produced cars. There is still a process, but it's very robots and, very automated. So I like to think about my life as a luxury car being made. Number one, because I'm one of a kind. There ain't no other Chisuvire. And even if somebody shares my name, they don't have my personality, they don't have my calling, they don't have my positioning, they don't have anything that I have. And for me, that's big because God is not mass producing. So even if your promise and mine are similar, they're different. So the pathway I will go through is different from your pathway. So that means I cannot judge my journey based on yours, right? And why is process important? I'm finding that process is important, and we'll be discussing it in depth in the next couple of sessions, because it gives me the map. I can look back, and if the car doesn't work at the end, you can look back and figure out where the problem happened. If the paint cracks or crackles, because this particular car I'm talking about, the paint, there's a lifetime guarantee on the paint. If there's a problem with the paint, they can go back to the process and figure out where it went wrong, right? And they even know who did it at what point, okay? And then, because the process is established, you can replicate the car. And that for me was big. And of course, I've already talked about guaranteed results. You have control over the result. Now, in terms of the process we're talking about, you and I don't have control in terms of how the price will come out. We have control of whether we'll get there or not. Yes, there's a possibility I will not get to the promise. And we'll be talking about those things in the next few seasons of conversations. So when you look at the promise that God has given you, there is a process to it. Just think about it. If you're employed and you have a salary of whatever amount it is, there are things you need to accomplish to be paid at the end of the month. If I'm working on a project for a client, there are things I need to accomplish to be paid at the end of the month, or at the end of the project, or at the end of whatever timeline we have. So those are the things I would be asking us to think about. Even I'm thinking about it. Because in my journey, there are things that are incomplete still, right? So the promise has a process to it. And I think I alluded to it in one of the earlier videos. So if you haven't watched the earlier videos about the promise, the links are in the description below. Feel free to just go back as often as you need to look at them and understand them and deepen them. Please let me know what you think. Any questions you have, we shall be answering them. After all, this section now we're discussing is based off a question somebody asked me. So thank you for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so that you can always receive a notice of when we put up the next video. Shalom.